Well, this video is gonna be extra weird. Firstly, I originally intended it to be just one enormous multi-hour video, but as it turned out, the rough cut was something around 4 hours, which probably means I'm capable of cutting it down to something like, I don't know, 3 hours. But I don't have time for editing, so guess I just have to split it into parts if I want it released before the remake. Which is another thing that I should address. I actually started to write this in late 2020, when I didn't know that remake was happening. And by pure coincidence, I finished recording and editing about a week before they announced KOTOR remake, which kinda means that I wanna get this whole behemoth of a video out, at least in parts, before the remakes comes out, and this is not gonna be paid any attention to at all. So yeah, this is basically a critical reevaluation of series that was left for nearly 20 years and celebrated for, well, not much of a good reason. And with this weird preamble, let's get on with it. We open with a text scroll and iconic Star Wars music. The text scrolls have been staple of the series going back to the original movie. They serve as a quick introduction to the world and establishing the baseline without breaking the fourth wall. So let's take a quick look at what it has to say. 4,000 years before the rise of the Galactic Empire, the Republic verges on collapse. Darth Malak, the last surviving apprentice of Dark Lord Revan, has unleashed an invincible Sith armada upon the unsuspecting galaxy. Crushing all resistance, Malak's war of conquest has left the Jedi Order scattered and vulnerable, as countless knights fall in battle and many more swear allegiance to their new master. In skies above the outerworld rim of Taris, Jedi battle fleet engages the forces of Darth Malak in desperate effort to halt the Sith galactic domination. But this last paragraph leaves me confused. If the Jedi battle fleet was sent here to halt Malak's advance, how could have they been surprised that they found Sith fleet attacking them, as commented on by both Card and Bastila later on in the game? Were they expecting the Sith to just sit back and do nothing? This line of logic isn't complete. There is no reasonable explanation as to why we are above Taris. We just are. This probably resulted as a lack of redrafting. When you are making scripts, you just have to redraft. It's a necessary step to make the story more coherent, and sometimes you have to abandon whole plot lines to progress. I think someone here forgot to redraft their work when they made changes later on. Moving on, our character wakes up on board Endar Spire, the Republic ship, during a battle. Further supporting the surprise element of this attack, we are immediately presented with the first NPC, Trask Olgo. Not that you need to know his name, he's basically just a prop guy to mechanics. When you're trying to get as much of the information as possible from him as most players would, you're hit with this.
So hurry up and grab your gear. You need to suit up so we can get out of here. You can move the mouse to the edges of the screen to rotate the camera. Alternately, moving the mouse while holding down the right mouse button will rotate the camera as well. To move towards the footlocker, hold down the right mouse button and face the camera towards it. Then hold down the left mouse button as well to cause the character to run forward. You can left-click on an object to select it. Once the footlocker is selected, left-click on it again to perform the default action and open it.
How did anyone think this was a good idea? That's beyond me. But if there is someone who's not up to speed with fundamentals of writing, one of the most important rules of dramatic writing is to not break the fourth wall. Just don't fucking talk to the audience. It's not that hard. It takes people out of the moment because their brain goes like, oh right, I'm playing a video game instead of immersing themselves. Jesus Christ, this is writing 101. But as we make our way through the ship trying to get to the bridge, we'll get few more parallels of dialogue from Trask, and you just have to hear them.
You always control the leader of the party. You can switch who is the party leader by left-clicking on their portrait in the lower left corner of the screen. Left-click my portrait now to switch me to the party leader, then use me to open the door. Left-click to target the door, then left-click it again with the mouse to open it. That door is locked. I don't have the codes to open it, but switch me to the party leader so you can use my security skills to slice into the access panel and open the door. Target the door using the mouse. When you have selected the door, the target menu will appear. The icons in the target menu are the additional options you can use on the door. Look at the target menu and find the security icon. Remember, the security icon only appears if you're controlling a character with the security skill. Once you see it, left-click it with the mouse to use your security skill on the door. In the lower right of the screen, you'll see a list of icons. This is your action menu. You can select items from this menu by using the mouse. Left-click the icon you want to use to activate that power or item. Clicking on the arrows above and below the icon will cycle to other powers or items in that list. The first icon of the action menu is for friendly force powers. The second is for medical items such as med packs and antidote kits. The third icon is for miscellaneous items such as stimulants and energy shields. The fourth icon is for mines and only appears if you have a mine in your inventory and have the demolition skill. The icons in your target menu will change depending on whether your targeting circle is on a door, a container, a friendly creature, or an enemy. Left-click the mouse to select the target and bring up the target menu. Left-clicking on the target again will perform the default action on it. The first icon is for combat feats. The second icon is for hostile force power such as choke and kill. The third icon is for grenades.
Some real good choice of dialogue. It certainly doesn't feel like Trask is just glorified text-to-speech device that works as a mouthpiece for the writers to get the player up to speed. Look, he has another great line about vibroblades.
Your melee weapon is made using a cortosis weave. It's strong enough to stand up against anything, even a lightsaber.
Wait, what? If it can resist lightsaber, why aren't you making armors and shields out of this stuff, you weirdos? Why the swords? This also fucks with every single one of the movies quite a bit, doesn't it? If there was a material that can resist lightsaber strikes all this time, in quantities that people have it regularly as a self-defense weapon, why wasn't it standard equipment for clones and stormtroopers? Seems quite useful and probably would be effective against blasters too. There is no reason given why it shouldn't. I would say the rebels would be quite fucked if stormtroopers had armors out of this stuff. It is a rare material, you can't just make armors out of this. Oh really, is it? So tell me then, why does every single being with two hands that isn't a Jedi have this thing? If it's supposed to be rare, then you should have done a better job of representing that in a game. And even if it is rare, that just bolsters my point. If it is rare, make yourselves armor out of it. And if you run into Jedi, just use standard metal knives or blasters or anything. You don't necessarily need to avoid their weapon. They can't do anything to you. This is one of plethora of world building issues in this game, and yeah, it's really early on, but there are gonna be a lot of them. This one specific is present to justify the mechanics of the game with in-universe explanation, regardless of how much would it fuck up the entire world building of prequels and the OT, and undermine its own plot and world building. It's kind of a shame, and I don't really have words to describe this, because I don't really understand why would you need to do that. You don't need to have an explanation why this thing works or doesn't. They put it there because they saw it as a problem, but players are actually capable of distinguishing between game mechanics and lore. Moving on from this, and I still have more questions and very little satisfactory answers. Why are the Sith fighters attacking the ship that's being boarded by their own troops and boss? Doesn't that defeat the whole purpose of boarding action? We find no one on bridge. Well, how surprising that everybody already ran to the escape pods on a ship that's barely holding together, overrun by enemy troops. At next, we get a scene where Trask sacrifices himself. Thank you, you non-entity without any character traits or motivations. If I were real cynical, I would say you were invented at the last minute to deliver dialogue that originally belonged to Card, but sounded strange from a guy who's only contacting you through communicator and tries to get you out of this damn ship. There is only one mention of Trask in the entire game, and the character doesn't even fucking react to it. We land on Taris and have some spooky dreams. When we wake up, Card is here, and we are in some apartment on Taris. The deal with Taris is actually quite simple. Sid installed quarantine with warships and declared martial law. We have to avoid them and find Bastila, the Jedi who was in charge of this mission. It seems reasonable enough. Bastila is doubly important because of her battle meditation, a force ability to influence morale of all armies. I'm not sure how this ability is supposed to work or what it is derived from, but introducing new powers is fine as long as it doesn't happen too often and doesn't undermine important plot points in prequels and DOT. When we take step outside, a Sith officer is doing great on this building. I'm mostly fine with it since they are looking for us in the end, and it isn't unreasonable to assume that the patrol could run into us. But his specific dialogue confuses me. So, if I understand it correctly, they did a raid before, but they didn't find us. How? We are literally behind a door that local janitor could open. Were we not here? Why and how would that even work? Since when was the quarantine even installed and when did the raid start? I was under the impression that they were happening because of us landing on Taris. These questions are gonna be ignored by the game to make sure that you can't spot the fact that we are incredibly lucky that we haven't been captured before the game even properly began. It also confuses me, why are the Sith concerned with the one talking back to them being an alien? They aren't shown to be xenophobic in any other instance. Is it just this one officer? In which case, what are the chances that the one xenophobic officer would be sent to the apartment that's notorious for having illegal aliens in it? Seems counterproductive and downright ineffective, since this officer could miss some Republic fugitives in his bad straits against aliens. But I digress. Perhaps he was just trying to fit in with the xenophobic locals, since yeah, the whole upper city is supposed to be xenophobic, despite there being just about, 3 instances of this being the case, as opposed to the numerous instances where people just don't give a single fuck. And since we are on the subject of world building, I would also like to take a look at itself. It has 3 layers: upper city, lower city, and the undercity. So the whole planet is just one big city, right? Well, this galaxy doesn't seem to have shortage of those. Must be a big overpopulation problem. Just to be clear, I'm criticizing the fact that they took the concept of Coruscant and just renamed it. It's meta reference to the original work and it has very little narrative reason. Taris really didn't need to be a city planet. It isn't central to the plot. It isn't a plot hole, it's just something to keep in your mind as we progress, because especially on Taris, things like these are prevalent. And come to think of it, this leads me to, how would this place even work? I mean, like, economics and security. How would the trade work besides through local crime lords, since most of the residents of the Upper Taris aren't supposedly willing to much as tolerate the presence of non-humans, much less to trade with them? So why is business in lower cities so easy? It should be dependent on tight supply of goods that go through Davik or people like Gadden, yet this is never as much as brought up as a concern. You may think I'm just complaining about nothing, but this unfinished worldbuilding makes Taris that much less believable, and thus the stakes are negatively impacted, because the world feels artificial, which is going in direct contradiction to why we write and consume stories in the first place. Moving on from the incomplete worldbuilding, we should take a look at how the plot is doing. Oh wow, we have meaningfully different options how to progress. What a luxury! But I want to talk about one of these 2 routes specifically, the one that begins in Cantina. We can talk to some off-duty Sith officers. This is one of fairly well executed conversations, something that definitely isn't a rule for this game. She explains to us why so many join the Sith and that for them it's just a job, a chance to get out of their planet. This is an interesting concept. It helps to humanize the Sith and make them more sympathetic than force of mindless drones. They even invite you to their party where they try to have fun on boring and hostile planet. So it understandably gets a bit frustrating when you just steal their uniforms, something they would probably get court-martialed for or kick out of the army, if not just outright executed, considering how worried this soldier gets at the simple thought of leaving his search to save another squad.
Hey, I'd never disobey my orders. I'm not a fan of court-martials and executions. I was just talking, you know. Nothing anyone has to mention to the commander.
Now, to be fair, this could be a really good plot point. The player being confronted with this person at some later point in the game, having to face up to the fact that their influence on other people's lives might not always be positive. And that's it, are just people, not just mindless drones. They have their lives. Unfortunately, this only happens when the writers decide that the character it happened to is important enough to deserve this kind of treatment. And you know what? Since we got so close to the morality, let's talk about the morality system in this game.
I kind of feel like any game which can measure your morality with a number is kind of problematic, because it means A, it thinks it is the arbiter of when something is a right or wrong decision in no uncertain terms, or B, the game is stupid and so lacking in depth or complexity in its writing that you really can boil things down that far.
Oh, sorry, that wasn't me. That was H-Bomber Guy, and I completely agree with him on this point in his Fallout 3 video, and I think it applies here as well. KOTOR lacks this complexity so much that all the choices can be boiled down to ridiculously evil shit or giving people all your stuff for no good reason. The game also acts as moral arbiter, which can be really frustrating when things get nuanced for once in a while. By the way, his Fallout 3 video is amazing, you should go and check it out, link in the description. So, ignoring the very questionable morality, we got our uniforms, with which we can gain access to the lower city via elevator. Now, there are two elevators in Terrace. The upper one connects the upper and lower city, while the lower one connects, you guessed it, lower city and undercity. The question is, why not just have one elevator with multiple levels to go to? It's very much the gamey thing here, it doesn't make much sense. Why would you also have a gullible guard stationed at the upper elevator? Would it make more sense if both upper and lower require papers? But let's be more generous and give it the benefit of the doubt. And say you can't have both, for some arbitrary reason. In which case, why wouldn't you put the more thorough security at the upper elevator, where you're in full control, and put the low security at the lower elevator as a token gesture that you care what travels between undercity and lower city, even though you couldn't care less? The security is flipped backwards for the same reason as vibroblades resisting lightsabers before, trying to justify gameplay within the narrative. This is the second time if you keep count, or hell, you can make a drinking game out of this. This time it is the competence of the Sith that took the hit. We take the elevator into the lower city and witness the gang war we've been told about before firsthand. Though the dialogue could have been written better. We enter a cantina and meet few local Patreons, first one being Callow Nord. He is a bounty hunter that came here looking for a job. He makes quite an impression for sure, intimidating and ruthless. Next is Mission, Twilight Girl, and Zelbar, her Wookiee companion. We'll approach both of their characters much later on, but for now we can get some more background info on Taris, Calo, Davik, and gangs from Mission. If you want to, it has literally zero impact on the main plot to know these things, so I guess if you want background information, it's here in this game, which would be actually quite a good subtitle for it. Anyway, Mission points us in direction of Gadon Tech, leader of the Hidden Bags. So that's where we shall head next, because our plan was literally to just run around and hope we bump into the big sign saying Bastila this way. Bags seem very keen on security, but they let their guards just stand alone outside the front door. What the fuck? Can't you retards just use cameras and comms instead of placing your people at such a risk when walkers are going around randomly attacking people? In any case, we get a bit of memo on what Bastila's situation might be from Gadon, and we run into some issues. You see, normally Bastila would have been sold as a slave to off-world slaver or to Davik, but there's gonna be a annual swoop race, which Brejik, the leader of Walkers, wants to use to gain prestige and finish off Hidden Bags in the gang war. But remember, off-world slavers are not reachable due to Sith quarantine, so the only real option would be Davik. Now, Davik, as we are later shown, runs background checks, so there's very little chance that he wouldn't find out about who Bastila really is, especially because Walkers already think that she's a Republic officer, so that's a good starting point. With this in mind, the very goal and profit-oriented Davik would most likely give Bastila to Malak and lift quarantine. I hope I don't have to say, but this is a really bad fucking outcome, as it would end the plot right there, at that very moment. Sith have Bastila, the Republic loses war, which is a point you should actually keep in mind. Who the hell wrote this plot? Why did you make the scenario so that if we land in any other time than we did, the plot fucking ends? This is but one in a series of convenient timings that we would usually call contrivances. And I'm gonna be using that word a lot in this entire video, so get used to it. The writers, as usual, wanted to bump up the stakes, but created an unnecessary contrivance that serves to undermine the entire situation when given more than surface level look. Well, Mr. Smartpants, what would you do? All stories have contrivances. Well, I'm glad you ask. How about we don't let Gadon say that line about Bastila being sold? That would fix like a lot of it. It would still be contrived, but not in nearly as devastating manner. If we had Walkers just keep Bastila as slave under normal circumstances, we resolve the plot ending if we landed in any other time than we did. Like, imagine if we landed 2 days later. The plot would fucking end. It would just mean that we have the opportunity to get Bastila without having to slaughter most of the Walkers. And to address the second part of the argument, writers are supposed to solve writing problems, write in limitations of cause and effect, not throw arms into the air and just give up because they would have to redraft their script one more time. If you want your payoff to be as potent as possible, you will fucking adhere to the cause and effect, because this is how own world operates. Sorry for the tangent, I had to address it, but the rest of the conversation is still pretty important for the plot. We have to retrieve a prototype accelerator on a swoop bike that will give Bags advantage in a race. Gadon also trades with us the Sith uniform for the papers we need to get to the Undercity and tells us to find Mission to get us into Walker base via back entrance. And off we go, about 20 meters till we meet some Walkers resisting to pay Davik's enforcer and Kender's Ordo, hired Mandalorian mercenary. We also have the option to see Calo collecting some bounty just as we enter the apartments. If you want, really, you don't need to. I just think it was a neat detail, actually seeing him work. Wish this game had more of these little moments. The Sith Guard lets us down into the Undercity. Around the elevator there is an outcast village. Outcasts are mostly descendants of people sent down in some sort of banishment. Are all the people from all over the planet banished into this village? Or Are there villages around all elevators? Are there any more elevators? Why would you stay here and not just go into the lower city? I don't know. Maybe the Cid would stop them, despite clearly not caring about anything happening in lower city at all. Well, beside the escape pods. Which reminds me, it is pretty lucky that we landed in Upper Terrace and not in the Undercity. We would probably have been really fucking dead if we landed here. But whatever, as long as the contrivances are kept at a minimum, I'm sure it will be just fine. In any case, we can help these people. But events that are about to take place in few hours of gameplay make this a bit redundant, so players are mostly gonna do it for the XP. There are few things I didn't mention about the Undercity so far. Firstly, there are Rakus, mutants that live in the deepest layers of Terrace. If they bite you, you become Rakul yourself, which of course doesn't impact the gameplay at all, because it would be next to impossible to craft a challenge out of them without the chance to land single bite. Maybe next time don't set challenge too high, so that it's impossible to craft challenge out of it, you morons. Having the player get bitten and actually having to find cure first before continuing on. Can't be having that. The main plot is knocking on the fucking door and it has form of Mission Veil, literally just appearing out of thin fucking air a few moments after we dealt with Rakus. Lucky. She was exploring in the Undercity with Zelbar because that's what you do here if you're bored, I guess. Anyway, Zelbar got kidnapped by Gamorrean slavers and she needs help rescuing him and agrees to help you to get into the Volker base as a reward. This would be convenient as all hell if there was a reason to believe that she would not be willing to help us otherwise. So yeah, I don't have a problem with this. And off to sewers we go. Why to the sewers? Well, you see Gamorrean slavers took Zelbar there because they have camps there. Wait, why would you build a camp in the least traveled and most dangerous part of the planet if you want to kidnap and sell people into slavery? I imagine lower city apartments wouldn't ask any questions or many questions if they decided to base their operations there, considering how willing they are to give places to an assassin with government bounty on her head. Well, because otherwise the writers would have to alter the pieces they put into place with another redraft, and they could not be bothered to do that. We'll make our way through the sewers, which I had to say are very unnecessarily prolonged at the level. Like, seriously, there is basically nothing besides loot. Fight the Gamorreans and rescue Zelbar, who decides that escaping slavery by an inch, the only reasonable thing to do now is to pledge eternal servitude to an utter stranger who was but a member of party that rescued him. So yeah, we have another member of our party. That was definitely worth the mind-boggling logic here. With Zelbar rescued, mission takes us to the back entrance of the Volker base. But there's one obstacle in the way of getting in. A Rancor. Wait, what? What the hell is Rancor doing here? Was there a missing dialogue or data pad entry or what? Why is there a fully grown Rancor just chilling in the back of the entrance of Volker base? If someone wants to propose that it is for security reasons, it is probably the most ineffective way to do this. With Rancor in the backyard, you might as well just build a wall there, because no one's getting past that either. And wall doesn't require massive amount of food to sustain. In Volker base I have only a few complaints. Number one is the general problem with all bases, and that is that nobody's watching security cameras and doesn't spring an alarm as soon as we enter. And number two is that the entire sequence is just so that we can get an engine, and for that it is way too big. I think development time that was spent on this could have been better spent on some later parts of the game, especially the Cid bases. Which, one thing that I have to compliment about the Volker base is that it at least has its own personality, which is not something that the Cid bases will have. After we get the the engine, we make our way through the front entrance right to Gaddon. Gaddon says that we can get the racing seat on the special bike with this reasoning.
Gaddon, you can't be serious. We need one of our best riders on that bike. We can't let some rookie take the prototype engine into the race.
I have to be honest with you. There's a reason I'm letting you take the prototype engine. The accelerator isn't stable. There's a good chance it could explode during the race. I can't ask one of my own riders to take the risk. They'll be running unmodified swoops in the race. You'll be the only one using the prototype. If you can complete the track before the accelerator overheats, then you'll win for the Bex. If you die, then one of my other riders could still come through for me.
That's not really an answer, buddy. You just kick the can down the road. So let's break it down. Volker's losing in this race is essential for Beck's survival. They can't take any chances, they need their best riders on the fastest bike. Considering everything, one possible injury, or hell even death, for avoiding total destruction and many deaths, is worthy trade that any sane leader would risk. Not to mention that you put your people at risk regularly, so I don't get what's your problem. But what about our perspective? Do we really need to race? Consider this line.
We Becks don't believe in intergalactic slavery, but the Volkers aren't so picky.
So this means that they would set Bastila free if they want, right? Fulfilling our goal with less risk, and we can still act on our own if things go south. Overall, it's better for both sides that we don't race, but here we are. I've been dropping small hints for some time, but there seems to be some sort of prerequisites or story beats or pieces of Star Wars iconography just placed into the part of the player, whether make a lick of sense or not in this context. This is a problem because writers are sacrificing integrity of the story and cause and effect for a cheap key jangle. If you're interested, there is a superfluous video from YouTuber Fringy all about key jangling. For those already familiar with the concept, let's explore something that might have rose up as a side effect of this writing technique. Despite us having very little details from the development cycle, I think there are fair few things that suggest that something very different was planned than what we actually got in terms of story. There are certain plot points, plot lines, as well as horror character interaction that don't make a lot of sense in this story. For example, Juhani's portrayal of Taris, Bastila's doubt about Jedi ways, and other pieces of dialogue as well as opening crawl suggest that the story, and Taris in particular, went through several major redrafts. Now, that's good, obviously redrafting is necessary, but it has to be done with the entire thing, not just half-ass it and hope nobody notices. The originally planned story was altered for one reason or another, but some remnants still remained, for cost efficiency I imagine, and now cause very questionable action, characters with split personality, butchered world building, and honestly even characters that don't make a whole lot of sense in this story. It also likely led to some very questionable design decisions, like including the turret sequence and pod racing, neither of which are particularly well executed, and pod racing having little to no justification within the narrative. I hope you didn't mind the tangent here, I just think it's a fairly important point to raise, because most of these issues could have easily been patched up with a bit of work. Which honestly is another good subtitle for this game. At any rate, let us continue. We win the race, but Brashik is not in a mood for defeat. I'm not sure why he was allowed to go here, as we are told only racers and mechanics are allowed, but whatever, he's delivering the prize because apparently nobody else could. He attacks us, but Bastila, who was under some kind of neural restraint, breaks it and helps us defeat him. With this done, she decides to act like a total bitch, talking down to us for no reason at all. We also get another spooky vision. I think they have some kind of relevance to the story. And we get back to the apartment we started in. I think it's good time to mention this, but how come no one came searching for the bodies of the patrol from the beginning? Oh, they did? Wonderful job, except How the fuck are we allowed to go back here? Surely the Sith would question more than just one fucking Duros. The Janitor might be of help, or anyone else who isn't looking for trouble with the Sith. I don't know what were I thinking with this. It's almost so obvious setup that I noticed it on my first run. It's a textbook example. Have Sith find our hideout, showing some measure of competence, and force us to take refuge in Beg's hideout or lower city apartments, just anywhere besides the one bloody place where Sid would look. Bastila will calm the fuck down after talking to Cart, and if we decide to talk to her later, she'll drop onto us some really heavy foreshadowing. Like, seriously guys, couldn't you at least try a little bit more? It wasn't so blunt before, and we aren't even close to when it is relevant. Canderous sends for us, and we get our asses to the lower cantina. He came up with a plan to get off Taris and wants us in because of how we raced. He didn't get paid from David in some time and decided to jump the ship. He wants to get the Sith codes to exit the planet. These plans are in the Sith base. He provides astromech for us to get us in. However, we must pay for it first. Why not pay for it in advance? We get in and get the codes and get out. Kenderos makes good on his part of the deal and tells us that we're gonna get a ship. We'll steal Davik's Ebon Hawk, which is surprisingly easy because, again, nobody's watching the bloody cameras. In the meantime, Malak, our main antagonist, ran out of patience that the search for Bastila is taking so long, and ordered orbital bombardments of Taris so that Bastila can't escape. It's called brutal and calculated. Great, honestly. The first appearance of main villain, he's very intimidating and seems smart enough. This is desperately needed considering that Sith so far have been completely fucking useless. Like, seriously, we can just run around with Bastila and ask Sith soldiers and all they have to say is,
Out of our way, citizen. We're on official Sith business. Just stand aside if you know what's good for you.
Malak's dialogue is pretty fucking cheesy. Gotta watch out for that. Now, when Malak orders the bombardment, Admiral Saw Karat protests. You remember this guy that Cart talked about, right? Well, he's quite concerned for both Sith and civilians on the surface alike. I think we should remember this, just in case we meet him later. Also, thanks to the bombardment, all the work you did for anybody down there is absolutely meaningless because they're still gonna die in nanosecond vaporized by blaster cannons. Great way to make people completely disinterested in Taris on subsequent playthroughs. With the bombardment underway, we make our way to the hangar. Trying to escape, we meet Davik and Callow and have to fight them for some reason. I'm really not sure what was that supposed to be. Hey, you two idiots, you know, maybe we could settle this later when the planet isn't exploding around us. And what jumping to conclusions that we are stealing this ship. Like, we are, but they have no way of knowing that. For all they know, we were just trying to get out of the exploding building! Anyways, we fight. Davik dies and Callow threatens us with a bomb, but is knocked out by falling roof. Well, he should be dead since he's just a regular human, but whatever, it's not like the main antagonist gets important information out of him later. I think it's fair to say that there were quite a few problems with Taris. Contrived plot, incompetent Sith, key jangling all over the place, and very rushed world building. The rest of the areas are not gonna be in such a detail as Taris was, because a lot of the arguments would be just repeated, and for the sake of time, I'll just go over the more unique and major stuff from now on. Like, there's still gonna be a lot, but yeah, I'm not gonna be ripping apart every piece of world building. We somehow avoid the turbo laser fire and dispatch of a few Sith fighters and jump to hyperspace, which I'm sure they had no way of preventing us from doing besides sending a few fighters. We decide that Dantooine is a good course to take, which is weird considering we already jumped to hyperspace. We're already on the way, you can't do anything about it, that's just how hyperspace works. Right? It's just a bizarre reaction from Card, the space pilot. When we arrive to Dantooine, we get audience with the Jedi Council. They decide to train us as a Jedi with some more foreshadowing.
Are you certain Revan is truly dead? What if we undertake to train this one and the Dark Lord should return?
We should discuss this matter more fully in private. Bastila, you and your companion must go. This is a matter for the Council alone.
And we go to sleep with another, this time even more elaborate, spooky dream. If you somehow failed to notice, the foreshadowing to the big twist is becoming more and more obvious, mainly thanks to the frequency it's being dropped at. Of course, you have to foreshadow things, there's no question about that, but you could at least try not to be too obvious about it. I'll get back to it quite soon, but bloody hell mate, the lack of effort that's just put into one of the better parts of the game frustrates me. Bastila runs away from the ship in the morning and goes to tell about the vision to the council. Unbeknownst to you, she's sharing these visions with you and felt you in it. Question mark? I don't know how that works. Is it like when Vader felt physical presence of Luke? Because that was because they were father and son and Luke was literally getting closer to Vader's proximity. You and Bastila were on the same ship all the time. Why would it be any different than usual? I don't know, it's just a bit strange. In any case, she tells this to the council and you get to train while they find out about the ruins from your vision. Next we get timescape a few weeks forward and we get a montage of what's been happening for the time we spent here. So we should take it slow and examine it closely. First off, we are training to be a Jedi. Wait, what? Why the fuck wouldn't you let player do that? You do that with Sith training later on. There are places that were clearly designed for this purpose and you just skip it? Okay game, but you do realize what you're doing, right? If you do this, players will have no connection to this place on any meaningful emotional level. So don't try to bank on this later by destroying the place and expecting us to care. Next up, I have a point to raise against what we see in the sequence itself. Namely flying. For those who saw Return of the Jedi, levitation might come across as something Palpatine would find quite handy. It is not as bad as in Rise of Skywalker, but it's the same bloody problem. It's showing off different force abilities for the spectacle alone, with no regard for the world it houses these abilities in. Flying datapad? Well, why not have a flying human with chairs spinning around him? That surely won't fuck up the source material. This is unacceptable behavior from the developers. I specifically assume this was idea of animation team and not the writers. Yet still, you can't just introduce something like levitation and not take a look if it fucks with the source material. There is a defense that floats around that it is technically possible. If it wasn't shown in the OT or PT and it would fuck up the plot points there, it is a retcon. Force can do what it's shown to do. If there was an instant where new ability would be useful and they weren't used, well, you can't add that fucking ability. It ain't rocket science. I have nothing but contempt for the absolute disregard with which these things are put together. They are as if KOTOR was separate universe, but it isn't. It says in the fucking title crawl. Have some respect for the source material you're writing for, or just don't write in that universe at all. I'm really sorry for this rant, but it's really fucking frustrating. One would think that when writers get the chance to write for a particular universe, they would at least care enough to take a look on how this universe operates. Moving on, these few weeks of training should be extremely suspicious to anyone who knows even rumors about Jedi training, including other Jedi here. And yet Card is the only one to point out that things out of the ordinary. To be more precise, all the other characters besides us, Bastila, are put on pause and don't exist at the moment. While we are training, they are just chilling in the hall, doing fuck all. For some it is quite understandable, like Zelbar, who doesn't really care about Dantooine, but some money and action motivated mercenary could be quite pissed at this if he had any agency at the moment. I also found it ludicrous that none of the Jedi would recognize your face. Revan was in the Jedi Order for quite some time before wearing that mask, but what do I know, perhaps it is not very distinctive face, but I doubt it. At long last, we, the player, get to do some training, which consists a grand total of: recite a thing you heard 20 seconds before, choose a crystal in the most obvious quiz ever, and do the job that's for fully fledged knights. Not quite balanced tries, but what do I know, I'm not a Jedi. And as for the last trial, we get to go to a place close by to fight a Jedi girl who ran away and made cat hounds attack people more. We fight and she loses. We can kill her or convince her to go back and ask for forgiveness. The way to convince her is in essence reciting the Jedi Code in a bit more elaborate sentences, which if told to any reasonable being would make them cringe on the spot, but for her it's the only thing that flies. Her name is Juhani, by the way, and killing her is not a really particularly meaningful choice, because she has quite a bit of interaction in the game, and you're just missing out on it if you kill her. Just to be even more clear, if you kill her, the game is nearly exactly the same, but with less content. That's not what I call meaningful choice. Killing her doesn't give you anything besides one fucking interaction and, well, we'll get to it. After this, we are sent into the alien ruins from our vision nearby. Wait a minute. Are you telling me that there were alien ruins? Alien fucking ruins nearby that for some reason nobody bothered to search. Why? And how? Surely anyone with eyes and curiosity would find them and the droid inside. Like, you need to only walk in a straight line. This droid has information about Empire before the Republic even fucking existed. Which in Star Wars universe, like if you found civilization before ancient Mesopotamia. The droid also has information about weapon system that wouldn't be overlooked by any military leader in history. It's rather significant, or at least it should be. Isn't it great when the game comes up with nonsensical storylines that require a world to stop existing outside of players' action? Such a great writing! We won't be approaching Rakatan lore in this video at all, cause that's a rabbit hole all in its own, and I get the feeling that the answers to many questions Rakatan Empire raises wouldn't be satisfactory. I'm vocal critic of the entire expanded universe, but for now I would just like to avoid the entire subject. Maybe some other day in some other video. For now, we'll just answer very basic questions to the computer after fighting deadly droids and get access to our star map number 1, or as I like to call them, MacGuffin number 1. Collect 4 and get location of Starforge, but wait, how would that work? I would have thought that if you have incomplete map, it's gonna be like incomplete puzzle, meaning that only one of the pieces we are looking for has the info we need, since we already have the landmarks to compare it against. So we don't need 4 maps, we need 2 maps. Or at least we should only need 2. This is honestly why it's MacGuffin hunt and not search for map. We need all pieces because we need all pieces. There isn't a line of logic that we could follow, it's just go find a thing. Also, how the fuck would Revan and Malak get here? This was at a time when the whole fleet they were leading went missing. How would you not notice one really tall guy and one guy with very specific mask and long cape that are also galactic heroes strolling around Dantooine so close to Jedi Enclave? Those are some crazy ninja skills there, Revan. I wonder if they show up later on. Before we progress with the plot, there is one elephant in the room that I didn't mention until now. It is how we are prompted to talk to characters. The one for Cart is especially amusing. This, as far as I'm concerned, was quite stupid move. You should either remove these prompts altogether and let players decide when or if they want to talk, or just enforce them and put the player into conversation when they reach certain criteria, like certain level or location. Let's take a look at another dialogism, shall we? Pastilla starts asking us some weird-ass questions. This is quite well and good, her reasons are fairly solid, though she could try to be less obvious about how strange these questions sound. The problem comes when she says her fucking motivation for doing this. She doesn't say it all, obviously, because that would ruin the twist, but she says enough. Please, for the sake of audience's sanity, don't make your characters tell their motivation. So, what Bastila could have said? How about, well, it's nothing, just checking if you're alright. That's definitely a weak excuse, but it sounds way more natural than we got, and it carries the same message as her saying her motivation out loud. To put it simply, people lie. When someone says their motivation, they have a good reason to do so, and it says something about them as people. Here it is to just explain to the player that Bastila isn't telling you all. We get conversation with Cart as well, where he expresses the obvious distrust of Jedi and all of this. I swear to God, Cart is like the only character with a fucking brain in this game. And he's just supposed to be a trope of grizzled veteran. With this nonsense done, we assemble our party and get our quest and some more of that foreshadowing. This time so obvious that I seriously don't understand how nobody saw the twist coming. Before we leave, just a small tangent on foreshadowing in this game. I tackled it earlier, but to put it into some more concise point. This game condensed tons of foreshadowing into span of the game that occupies about, I don't know, 2 hours or maybe 1, depending on how much time do you actually spend here. That's really bad, because this is at least 20-hour game. You just don't want to do that, because players will get suspicious way too early, especially thanks to some of the dialogue being so fucking blunt.
Could lead you down an all too familiar path.
Next up, Tatooine. I think Tatooine is pretty much the best planet in the game, considering everything. It might have to do with the simplicity of the main plot here, but you've already seen how the writers could fuck up a simple thing as fucking Dantooine, so good job here. We arrive in Anchorhead, which has been established by some corporation a long time ago and abandoned several times. The cycle goes like this. Some company buys Anchorhead and attempts to get mining going here, but before they realize how bad the metal is from Tatooine, they sunk too much money into it, and so they abandon it in quiet, simply leaving, wait several years, and some other company decides to try their luck. They fail, and the cycle continues. This is probably the most solid world building for a planet we had so far. At least as far as I can tell, this is fairly believable cycle. We have another vision about our desired MacGuffin, and Bastila talks about it with us for a moment. That makes sense, making some plan to get to the objective is a really good idea. And before we jump to the criticisms, I would actually like to talk about this. And by this I mean when game does things well, when the storytelling is at least somewhat solid and I can enjoy the moment, just having fun, which this game can do actually very well. I certainly won't be able to point out every single one of these because the video would be 10,000 years long, but they are there. The only problem being that you have to go through so much other bullshit to get to that it can be actually a bit exhausting. But back to Earth. For some reason, climbing the wall of Anchorhead isn't a viable option, and we have to get a hunter license to get out. We have to agree to kill sand people who are attacking Zerka vehicles and people. To achieve this peacefully, you need to buy HK-47. And this is actually another case of why is this even a choice? You don't get anything from not buying him, like unless you wanna keep those credits for some reason. You only lose options in dealing with the sand people and don't have one of your companions. In the dunes, you get sand people clothes and get into their enclave. You can kill them or negotiate with them. Afterwards, you gain access to Crab Dragon Cave right next to them with the help of a useful hunter and get your MacGuffin star map. How did this enormous carnivore survive on a planet that's pretty much confirmed to not have any stable water sources with medium prey at best? I don't know. Also, what would you do, you silly hunter, if we didn't show up? Blast sand people with that one idiot you had with you? Or wait here for another 2 fucking days in a desert till the overgrown lizard decides to get out? What if it decided to stay for long? Or fucking hell, what if it did? Also, what a fucking luck for us that he was here with such a handy solution as mines. We get the map and we are confronted by KOTOR. You remember him, right? He was the man who was left behind in a building bombarded from orbit, and there's so much rubble that it should broke every single bone in his body into bloody pieces. Anyway, he made deal with the Sith to hunt us down for money. He doesn't negotiate with you because it would hurt his reputation if you escape. So we kill him and escape. Ta-da! Yeah, attacking several Jedi in direct attack was totally sane idea. Good job, Calo. This about wraps up the plot on Tatooine. Which actually means that we are in the outro section. So yeah, this was part 1. As to when part 2 and 3 are gonna release, I have no idea. I already said it in the intro, but I'll repeat it here. I don't actually have any time for editing. So the most likely outcome is parts 2 and 3 are gonna be released about the same time next year. Yeah, I know it's a bit annoying, but if you're willing to stick with it, I'm probably gonna even get a better microphone so you don't have to listen to the crap you just listened. The substance is still gonna be there, it's just gonna sound a lot better. Secondly, I'm gonna be releasing videos, or at the very least I would like to release at least 1 or 2 videos throughout the year. It's of course not a guarantee, but I'm gonna be trying, and yeah, this about wraps it up. We have seen some pretty egregious things here, but it's gonna be basically nothing in comparison to what you're gonna see in parts 2 and 3. So yeah, take care and bye.